and what the Democrats are doing. They're in they're on the floor of the House right now, and they're sitting in. Are they sitting? They're literally sitting on the. They've camped out there all night long.
Some are, and people in the Senate are bringing them snacks, and other people are sending them food. Scott Moon on Twitter says the real issue is the list. What do we do with citizens suspected that lack evidence to arrest? And we've talked about this before. Why is there very little talk about vetting that list better? Because there are people on there who are just everyday Jane and John Does.
This whole no-fly thing and this list I'm very uncomfortable with it.
There are some people in this country who every time they fly, they get pulled aside.
I'm very uncomfortable with it because there's no due process at all with the list, and it's completely, we're suspicious, and then you have duplicate names, and I think the FBI is the one at fault, in my opinion, for what happened in Orlando. They had this person, they did the investigation. You have people saying, we were telling you, we were saying this. We knew something bad was going to happen. So, it's all about procedure at the end of the day. So we follow certain procedures, and if the FBI feels that you're in the process of conducting an attack on the United States, well, they should be watching you. Whether you should get a gun or not should be, whether you can fly, that's completely different. They should be watching if they truly believe, and that's the dirty secret about what really goes on in here, right? Is we put somebody on some sort of surveillance.
So my question is...
You're not that far off. You're just lost in procedure.
Well, I'm surprised
procedure.
What you just said about the list.
I'm uncomfortable with the list because it's just like the communist list. I'm uncomfortable with that because innocent Americans are being placed on that list. Because of what? Because of something they've said, because of the color of their skin, because to me, that's un-American. Now, let the FBI have their list. We're going back to procedure. Let the FBI have a list. They already do, right? Hoover was investigating everybody.
Right.
So they conduct these investigations. Dirty little... That's what I'm saying when I talk about procedure. We're following procedure. So just to create this list and nobody can fly, I'm uncomfortable with that.
Let me just explain one thing. Part of where I'm coming from. We saw this with Sandy Hook, where people said, were there warning signs? Is there something we could have done to prevent this? And I think that's a paramount concern for people. How do we prevent this from happening? I just feel like he said things that, and I keep using this term red flag, that to me raise a red flag. And who am I? I'm nobody. But just some of the things he said I thought were troubling.
Then back to procedure.
Okay.
You let the FBI do their investigation, and they do surveillance.
But if they don't
that's what they're there for.
If they don't find
then
he's
then it happens.
Actively plotting.
This is America. We're a free country. We are going to be vulnerable. We'll be vulnerable to things like this.
If his wife comes forward and says, listen, my husband says really off-the-wall things, I think he's going to go kill a bunch of people just because they're Americans. If she doesn't come
he didn't
forward...
kill them because they're Americans.
If she doesn't... Well, whoever it is.
We don't really know what he was thinking, but... Right.
If she doesn't come forward with his blueprint of where he's going to go and how he's going to do it, I feel like you're saying we couldn't have stopped him. And I think that's really concerning.
It is. And it is the dirty little secret. We live in a free country.
And that's the problem.
We're in a free country. Anyone can do one of these things at any time. Somebody can and remember, Sandy Hook wasn't anything to do with America and terrorism.
No.
It's just some crazy lunatic.
Right, but the talk is always...
We will not be able to legislate our way out of this. It's not going to. We aren't going to be able to do it. You have to change. I think you have to change the mentality of these people. And yeah, you do have to. If somebody's about to commit a terrible crime and there's evidence, then you have to report that. And Ben, again, back to procedure. The FBI has a procedure that they go through. They deem this person to be dangerous. That is a completely different level than just saying we're going to have Washington put people on a list. I mean, that is not following procedure. And I think Wells said it best this morning, where, how about going in front of a judge and getting an order of protection, if you will, that is basically protecting the country, that this person is planning some treasonous act.
I'm with
all
you
of
there.
That stuff. But again, you still don't prevent what happened in Orlando.
We couldn't have prevented him from buying a gun had had that evidence,
He
the things that I say raised
by the FBI for terrorist ties, and he didn't find any.
They said it was unfounded.
He
so
didn't
to
have
me,
links to a cell or the organization. Right. The difference is in that 911 call, no matter what his motive was, no matter what actually drove him to kill those people, that's what he said.
Yeah.
He could have, I'm not saying I would, but anybody could have a motive to murder and be crazy and say, I blame this on God. I do this because of Jesus. I claim allegiance to ISIS. You don't know that that's exactly true. And, of course, ISIS is going to say, yeah, we had something to do with it because somebody went and killed Americans. They're not going to have a problem denying it.
Now, if the FBI knew that he was having conversations with terrorist organizations, you would have seen, here's the problem. The FBI didn't know that. That's the problem. So, and there, Habaika is on, and he can bring a little libertarian view to this whole thing.
I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, what happened in your education?
Are you talking to me?
No, me.
Oh, yeah. I'm talking to you.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't understand your lack of appreciation for your civil liberties versus the need for security in the country.
Okay, so you're not talking to me. You're talking to me, Bill?
Bill or Jeff?
No, I'm talking to Jeff.
Yeah, because I hate to say this, Joe, I'm with
Bill
you.
and I are right in line with this. I'm not saying that I'm in favor of terrorist acts or anything along those lines, because I have to say that in the age of political correctness. But the reality is that we have civil liberties here in the United States, and you can always point to an extreme situation and then decide to have a general rule that applies. And I just, it's really disheartening to think that, someone can make a few phone calls and the next thing you know, you're on a list based on something you said when there's no proof that you're actually taking action.
Now, Joe,
law enforcement, and that's what the FBI, they're supposed to be doing those investigations.
What constitutes evidence?
What would be really cool?
A blueprint that says I'm going to Paul's...
Hold on, somebody from the federal government to come in, Homeland Security, and explain how this stuff works.
Yes, I think it would be a good idea.
And then maybe we could have, we'd have a little bit more enlightenment on the subject. But the reality is calling for some kind of blanket ban without using due process is a scary thing to me.
However,
the list you're talking about, though, doesn't that?
I am against the list. I have a problem with the list. However, and I got about 2 minutes, we're going to talk to Matt Schlapp. But listen, Joe, talk about when I say procedure, what that means. The FBI has a certain procedure. If they determine that somebody, or the CIA, that someone is about to commit a treasonous act on the United States, they have the ability to take an action.
Let me just go back a minute.
Yeah.
Was the Orlando massacre a heinous act? I would say yes. Was it necessarily treason? I don't think so.
I agree with that. I don't think it was.
There's a definition there's a definition of treason, and there's a difference between the acts.
Yeah.
Nobody thought Sandy Hook was nobody thought that Sandy Hook, it was a heinous act. Just like dude, that went into the movie theater and shot everybody up. Yeah. Heinous act. This act in Orlando, heinous act.
Now, Joe, I want to ask you this question. There is going to come a point that, and Israel has gone through this because of the constant attacks on Israel. So those citizens had to determine, I don't know what their constitution is like there, but they, I assume, had to determine at some point, we're going to allow the government to reach a little further for our protection. Now, that's the question that we are going to, at some point down the road, if these things persist. God forbid if, like the human bombings where you strap the bomb on yourself, what are they called again?
Right.
Suicide
if
bombing.
that begins to start to happen, there could come a time, Joe, where we as American citizens look at the situation and say, all right, we're willing to give up certain rights so that we are
going
safe.
in and out of a courthouse, going in and out of certain public buildings now, you have to pass through the metal detectors. You have to go through all of that stuff, show ID, all that. That's changed
post
over time.
9/11.
There was a reason why it changed over time. again, I'm not sure that a law was passed. What I don't like is government agencies imposing changes. I'd prefer to see, there be open debate on the floors of the legislatures.
Right.
Okay. Not
right.
someone just deciding that they're going to create some kind of list.
The list.
Can we agree, looking back at history, does everyone in this room and on the telephone, and I know we have to get to our guest, agree that Nancy Reagan, good American, great American? Can we all agree that?
I would think that most would say she was a great first lady.
Okay. So you know how she and Ronald Reagan fell in love? Her name was on a McCarthy-era list of communist supporters. Yeah. And she implored his help to try to get off of that list, and that's how they fell in love. But today, she would be on
the list.
Yeah.
Joe, I'm running out of time, but it's an interesting conversation for another day, and I really would love to get somebody in constitutional law, homeland security. It'd be great to know. But keep in mind, I'll leave it with this. We're all about keeping things safer. But the moment we found out the NSA was overreaching and looking at everybody, and it was us that might have been looked at, we're all up in arms and trying to limit the NSA. And that is that I don't want to keep it going. That's the problem with it. When it's fresh in our minds, we're okay with it, and then all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute, you're reading my emails. I don't want that. All right, Joe, thank you, Sergio. I'm going to give you the final word on this, and you got 10 seconds. Hit me.
Okay, take away the rights or take away guns from everyone. The bad people will find a way to get a gun anyway.
Yeah,
Look at the Charlie Hebdo shootings. There's no guns allowed in France, yet that happened. Then in the Scandinavian countries, like 6 years ago, some guy showed up on an island where it was a youth camp and just started shooting up all these kids.
Yeah.
There was no guns allowed in that country either. Private people weren't allowed. Somebody wants to do something, they'll find a way to do it.
No, Sergio, we're going to create the perfect society where nothing bad ever happens.
Why don't we just give them all guns?
All right,
everybody
Sergio.
Who comes here, everybody just gets a gun.
That might not be a bad idea. Sergio, thank you. And I want to go to Matt Schlapp. Can I keep this going right now? Do I have to take a quick break? Because Matt is with the American Conservative Union. Matt, I got to take one quick break and we're coming right back to you. Give me 2 minutes, and he's next. And he's going to talk about the decision not to endorse Assemblywoman Tenney. It's coming up next on WIBX.
Don't you love this time of year? Spring cleaning, sprucing up the backyard, doing outdoor activities. These may seem like normal activities to many people, but if you're suffering from neck or back pain, it can be extremely painful. If you've been suffering from pain, it's time to give Dr. Michael Tucherone a call. Dr. Tucherone has been offering chiropractic care, advanced K-laser treatments, internationally renowned Interrex therapy, and many other services to our area for years. Whether it's back pain, sports injuries, arthritis, whatever is causing you trouble, Dr. Tucherone will take the time to determine exactly what the problem is and determine how to get you the most effective relief. Visit drtucherone.com to see testimonials, videos, helpful treatments, and much more. If you're sick and tired of waking up in discomfort, call Dr. Michael Tucherone with offices in both Clinton and Hamilton. Call today to set up your consultation. 381-2944. Dr. Michael Tucherone, healing your pain, changing your life.
Mohawk Honda is your number one volume dealer north of New York City. Listen, they're ready to sell 600 vehicles in June. Mohawk Honda, Nick Bonarigo, number one ranked by dealer rating. The Mohawk Honda sales and service staff, recipients of Honda's President's Award Elite for their excellence in customer service. It's the service, that's how they sell the vehicles. They take care of their customers. That's how they sell the vehicles. And it's their MXP program. Mohawk Honda Exchange Program. Upgrade your vehicle to a newer one for the same or lower payment, all with no money down. Over 10 acres of cars, trucks, and SUVs. Go to MohawkHonda.com 24/7. It's a brand new website. Check it out. Or you can make the short drive, Route 50 in Glenville. Mohawk Honda going out of their way to please you each and every day.
Profile America, Thursday, June 23rd. On this date in 1868, Christopher Sholes of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, received a patent for the first practical typewriter. Produced in 1873, the Sholes machine even coined the term typewriter. It also featured today's familiar but awkward placement of keys. The arrangement was specifically designed to slow down typing by widely spreading the most common letters, in the hope of preventing the keys from jamming. In the middle of the last century, about a quarter of all high school students were enrolled in typing classes. Today, even though typewriter manufacturing has dwindled to near vanishing and moved offshore, nearly 79% of American households have some form of keyboard in them, on their desktop or laptop computers. You can find current data on the country's economy by downloading the America's Economy mobile application at census.gov/mobile.
You're listening to Keeler on WIBX.
Speaking of the commercials right there, 8:54, Matt Schlapp is the chairman of the American Conservative Union. They have endorsed George Phillips in NY22, not Assemblywoman Tenney. And the Assemblywoman came out pretty strongly against the American Conservative Union, calling them nothing but a social club. And Matt Schlapp is on now. Good morning, sir.
Hey, Bill. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being patient.
This has been a heated morning here. We're getting
There's
through
a lot
it.
going on in the country, so that's the way it goes, right?
There is. And look at the floor of the House right now. Okay, so we spoke earlier in the hour with Michael Long. He says he disagrees with your decision. Of course, Michael Long is the chair of the New York State Conservative Party. And I want to give you a quote that he said, "Matt's gotten bad information here." How do you respond to that, Matt?
Well, I have deep respect for Mike Long. He's a good man. And, I also have respect for the fact that he lives and works in New York, and this race is in New York. So, Mike's one of those people that I listen to on politics. But I think when it came to this case in this particular race, sometimes being locally involved doesn't give you the perspective you need. And I think the American Conservative Union has had the right perspective. And, I've done a lot of thinking about this race because when you're called evil by somebody who Claudia Tenney called our group evil for endorsing George Phillips, which was a little rough, I think. You can have political disagreements, doesn't mean someone's evil. And she also said the NRA had put politics over principle back when they endorsed Mr. Hanna in the previous cycle. So she has a reputation for getting pretty rough and getting pretty personal. But we have to do the right thing and take a step back and say, okay, what should conservatives do in this race? And I have to say, in my organization, the American Conservative Union, dealing with both Claudia Tenney and with George Phillips, in our personal interactions and walking through all the important issues, it just became clear of two things, that George Phillips has the character and the policy positions that match up very nicely with conservatives. Now, Claudia Tenney is conservative on a great many issues, and conservatives should do what they think is the right thing, and they should do what they're called to do. But we felt it very important to tell them we thought in this case, the judgment call was that George Phillips deserved our endorsement.
Got it. And, obviously this has been extremely heated here, and the latest polling is showing that it's very, very close. On issues when it comes to Assemblywoman Tenney, do you feel it's the issue of working together? And the last time we spoke with you, you talked about that, how she's going to have to work with others. Is that a conservative value, if you will?
Yeah, I think, we often put Ronald Reagan out there as the ultimate example of what the American Conservative Union, working with other conservative groups and activists across the country, was able to achieve. And Ronald Reagan stood boldly for principle, but he knew he had to do it within the context of a Democratic House of Representatives. And 6 years into his presidency, he had a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House. And it was Ronald Reagan who said that when you're with me 80%, you're my 80% friend, not my 20% enemy. And that's why even when we do our ratings, we don't chastise people who don't get hundreds. 80 and above, we consider them to be, conservatives.
What are issues? How did you get Claudia with a lower score? What issues or what votes brought her down?
Let's give her due. She voted conservatively on 3 out of 4 things that we looked at. And, we look at the size and scope of government. Can you all agree that the government is too big and does too much? And can we agree that, especially in states like New York, unlike, more red states, that it's especially true?
Yeah.
When you have a governor like Governor Cuomo, they get involved in they keep telling us that they're pro-choice, but they actually really want to be involved in every nook and cranny of your life. And so when it comes to like the type of light bulbs you want to use to light your house, isn't it kind of ridiculous that the government's telling you what light bulbs you should choose?
Sure. Yeah.
If you want to buy this type of alcohol or that type of alcohol, isn't it a little ridiculous that the government's telling you you can't get this one or you can get that one? Is it reasonable that when government is growing and growing and growing and growing, that if you're in the legislature, it's okay to pass laws that limit the ability of taxing authorities to raise your taxes? I think these are very bright line tests for conservatives. It doesn't mean she's a bad person. It just means that on those types of issues, we believe that she was okay with government getting bigger and creeping more into our lives. And we think it's proper to tell voters that. It's not proper for us to tell voters that she's got an F or that she's a liberal or anything like that. Would be dishonest. But it is fair to say, look, she only got 3 out of 4 right.
Yeah. And I believe that Mike Long said that he felt it was personal. And
not at all. Look, she called me evil. She called the organization evil. When we interacted with her, she was pretty. She didn't act in a way I would like my 5 daughters to act if they had been called in that situation. That being said, this is about the issues, and it's about George Phillips. And I don't know how well you all know George Phillips, but the man is irrepressible. He calls. He asks you how he can help you. He asks our opinion on things. He tries to learn. He comes to our events. He asks if he can bring other activists with him when he comes to our events. George was like that in his government service, whether it was working for Chris Smith on pro-life legislation or human rights legislation, or his work with the Jack Kemp Foundation. That is just who George is. George is a very positive, irrepressible, hardworking conservative who lives his values in his life. He's got a wonderful, beautiful family. And, part of this is George has charm. George wins you over, and George has the type of personality that can result in conservative achievements. I think Ronald Reagan had that kind of charm.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying anybody's comparable to Ronald Reagan, but George won us over, and I think George is winning over a lot of voters in the district because of the way that he just approaches people.
Listen, we appreciate you coming back on to clarify and coming on after Mike Long, Matt Schlapp. It'll be interesting. The primary, of course, is Tuesday, noon till 9. Thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me on again, guys, and have a great morning.
Right, you too, thanks. And that's it. That's where we will end it here today. Interesting, heated morning. Tomorrow, we have to keep the heat out just a little bit because we want to be able to leave time, not for the debate, but for Christine's final day in studio. It's tomorrow. WIBX Utica Rome. It is 9:02.